All right, let's get into it. If you've ever felt like your family was a perfectly wrapped Christmas present with a ticking time bomb inside, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And trust me, you won't believe what happened next. Seriously, hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to deal with something similar, because this one's a doozy. My name is Sarah, and for as long as I can remember, Christmas in my family was less about joy and goodwill, and more about a meticulously orchestrated performance of familial bliss. Picture this: a sprawling, opulent house, every surface gleaming with festive decorations, the scent of pine and cinnamon hanging heavy in the air, and enough gourmet food to feed a small army. On the surface, it was the picture of an idyllic holiday, but beneath that polished veneer, a different story was always playing out, one filled with unspoken expectations, simmering resentments, and a constant, low hum of anxiety in my chest. My parents, especially my mom, were the conductors of this grand symphony. They thrived on appearances, on projecting an image of the perfect, successful family, and for years, I tried to play my part. I'd show up, smile, pretend the subtle jabs about my career choices weren't really jabs, and mostly, I'd try to fade into the background while my younger brother, Mark, took center stage. Mark was their golden child, their pride and joy, the one who could do no wrong. He was charismatic, charming, and utterly reckless with money, a combination that, inexplicably, endeared him even more to our parents. I, on the other hand, was the responsible one, the financial consultant who built her own successful practice from the ground up, the one who paid her own way through college, who never asked for a handout. And somehow, that made me less, not more, in their eyes. This particular Christmas Eve, the air felt thicker than usual, heavy with an unspoken tension that I, being the intuitive one, could practically taste. We were gathered in the ridiculously oversized living room, a roaring fire crackling in the hearth, carols playing softly in the background. My dad was nursing a scotch, looking vaguely uncomfortable, which was his usual state when Mom was about to unleash one of her pronouncements. Mark was sprawled on the plush rug, scrolling through his phone, oblivious to the storm brewing, and Mom was in her element, perched elegantly on the edge of the antique sofa, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "Sarah, dear," she began, her voice sugary sweet, a tone that always signaled trouble. "We need to talk about Mark's new venture." Ah, there it was. Mark's new venture was a euphemism for another harebrained scheme he's cooked up that he expects someone else to bankroll. This time, it was a crypto startup because, of course, it was. He'd barely managed to keep a steady job for more than 6 months in his entire adult life. But suddenly, he was going to be the next tech mogul. I'd heard snippets of this plan for weeks, and my stomach had been churning with dread. As a financial consultant, I knew a bad investment when I saw one, and Mark's crypto startup was screaming scam, louder than a megacity fire alarm. "What about it, Mom?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even, though my heart was already pounding against my ribs. "Well," she sighed dramatically, "it requires a substantial initial investment, and your father and we've already put in quite a bit, but it's just not enough to get it off the ground properly." She paused, letting the implication hang in the air like a suffocating blanket. "Given your expertise in finance, we thought you'd be thrilled to help your brother get his start." My blood ran cold. "Mom, we've talked about this. I don't invest in things I don't believe in, and frankly, Mark's business model is speculative at best. It's too risky, and I don't have that kind of capital lying around for a venture like this." That last part was a lie, of course. I had plenty of capital, thanks to years of careful saving and smart investments. But I wasn't about to throw it into a bottomless pit just because Mark had a new shiny toy. Mark finally looked up, a scowl on his face. "Oh, come on, Sarah, don't be such a buzzkill. It's the future, you're just jealous I found something revolutionary before you did." I bit back a sharp retort. Jealous of his perpetual state of financial dependency? Hardly. Mark, it's not about jealousy. It's about sound financial decisions. And this isn't one of them. My mom's smile faltered, replaced by a tight-lipped grimace. Sarah, your brother needs your support. We are a family. We help each other. The subtext, as always, was clear: you help them, never the other way around. We've always pooled our resources for important family matters. Think of the family vacation fund. For instance, we all contribute to that, don't we? The family vacation fund. Oh, that sacred cow, every year, for the past 5 years. My parents had coerced us into contributing a substantial sum to a shared fund for a luxurious family Christmas vacation. It was always somewhere extravagant: a ski chalet in Aspen, a villa in Tuscany, a private island resort. The catch: my parents always decided where we went, when we went, and what we did. It was less a shared experience and more an elaborate stage for them to display their wealth and control. I contributed begrudgingly, feeling obligated, but resenting every penny. It was just another way they exerted their influence, a financial tether disguised as a generous gesture. This is different, Mom, I insisted, my voice gaining a bit more firmness. The vacation fund is for a shared experience. This is an investment in a highly volatile, unproven business. My dad finally chimed in, his voice gruff. Sarah, your mother and I believe in Mark. And frankly, your constant negativity is putting a damper on the holiday spirit. Negativity, that was their favorite word for my independent thinking. Then, Mom did something that truly stunned me, even after years of her manipulative tactics. She straightened up, her eyes narrowing. Well, if you're not willing to be a team player, Sarah, then perhaps you don't need to be part of all our family's future endeavors. We're a family, and we move forward together. If someone isn't willing to contribute, then perhaps they shouldn't reap the benefits. She looked at Dad, then at Mark. What do you two think? Should Sarah be part of the Christmas vacation next year? If she's not willing to support her family? My jaw dropped. They were actually doing this, right there, on Christmas Eve. They were holding a literal vote on whether I was allowed to participate in future family events, simply because I wouldn't bankroll Mark's latest folly. It was absurd, humiliating, and incredibly cruel. Mark, ever the opportunist, grinned. Sounds fair to me. If she's not in, she's out. My dad, bless his perpetually weak-willed heart, just nodded slowly, avoiding my gaze. It's about commitment, Sarah? So, Mom concluded, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. It's unanimous then. 3 votes to 1, Sarah. You're officially voted out of the family Christmas next year, and perhaps all future family trips funded by the family fund. She emphasized family fund with a thinly veiled sneer, implying I was somehow leeching off them, despite having contributed my fair share, if not more. Over the years, the words hung in the air, cold and sharp, severing something inside me. It wasn't just about Christmas, or a vacation, or even Mark's stupid startup. It was about years of feeling unseen, unheard, undervalued. It was about their relentless control, their constant need to keep me in a subservient role, to remind me that my independence was a threat to their carefully constructed narrative of a dependent daughter. It was about the casual dismissal of my professional achievements, my financial acumen, my very being. A wave of humiliation washed over me, followed by a searing, unfamiliar heat, pure, unadulterated rage. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at them. My family, who had just, quite literally, cast me out of their inner circle for daring to say no. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were demanding financial contribution as a condition for my familial inclusion, effectively commodifying my relationship with them. I felt a prickle of tears behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of them. Not tonight. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Fine, I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. If that's how you want to play it. I stood up, my legs feeling strangely numb. Merry Christmas, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I didn't wait for a reply. I just walked out of that living room, past the twinkling lights and the perfectly wrapped presents, past the facade of their perfect family, and straight out the front door. The cold night air hit me like a shock, but it was nothing compared to the chill that had settled deep in my bones. I got into my car and drove, aimlessly at first, then instinctively towards my apartment, the entire drive. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: hurt, betrayal, anger, and a growing sense of clarity. This wasn't a family, it was a corporation with a toxic hierarchy, and I was being deemed surplus to requirements. The pain was immense, but something else was stirring too. Something fierce and resilient. They thought they had cut me off, dismissed me, but they had no idea what they had just unleashed. They had just given me the ultimate motivation to reclaim my power, to show them that my value wasn't contingent on their approval or their carefully curated Christmas list. And as for that precious family vacation fund, well, a new, much more satisfying plan was already beginning to take shape in the darkest corners of my mind. It was a plan that would turn their petty act of exclusion into an act of profound self-empowerment for me, and a very public, very fitting consequence for them. The memory of their smug faces, their collective vote against me, played on a loop in my head, voted me out. It was so clinical, so devoid of warmth or familial love. It cemented the truth I'd always vaguely known, but never fully accepted: I was an asset to them, not a beloved family member. And now that I had refused to be their personal ATM, I was disposable. But here's the thing about being disposable once you're no longer needed. You're free from the endless demands, the emotional blackmail, the suffocating expectations. And in that moment of profound hurt, a seed of fierce determination began to sprout. They had wielded their power, their collective decision to cast me aside. But what they hadn't considered was the power I held, the power of my own resources, my own independence, and my own choices. I thought about the thousands of dollars I had unwillingly contributed to that family vacation fund over the years, money that could have gone into my own investments, my own dreams, or even to help someone truly in need. Instead, it was earmarked for another extravagant trip I didn't even want to go on. A trip designed more for their social media bragging rights than for genuine family bonding. And now, they had conveniently decided I was no longer worthy of even that. The anger was a fire now, burning away the last vestiges of my ingrained desire to please them, to win their approval. It was a liberating fire. They voted me out, I muttered to myself, gripping the steering wheel. Fine, two can play that game. I pulled into my apartment complex, the city lights a blur through my unshed tears. But these weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of a deep, transformative anger, a realization that enough was finally enough. This was the turning point. This was the moment I stopped being the dutiful daughter, the compliant sister, and started being entirely, unapologetically, me. And part of being me was taking back what was mine, and using it to make a statement they would never forget, a statement that would echo far louder than any petty vote they could ever cast. My heart was still racing, but there was a strange, thrilling sense of resolve building within me. The pain was still there, a sharp ache, but it was now overlaid with a steely determination. They had played their hand, and it was a cruel, callous one. Now, it was my turn, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that my hand would be far more impactful. The Christmas Eve ultimatum had been delivered, and it had set me free to plan, free to act, free to finally put myself first. If you've ever been in a family where love felt conditional, where every gesture of affection came with an invisible invoice attached, then you probably understand the subtle, insidious way resentment can build. For me, that resentment wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, steady drip. Drip, drip of small slights, overlooked achievements, and constant comparisons. That Christmas Eve vote wasn't the first crack in the foundation. It was just the one that finally splintered it beyond repair. My childhood wasn't overtly abusive, not in the way most people think of it. There were no raised hands, no shouting matches that left the house vibrating. Instead, it was a more insidious form of control: financial leverage, emotional manipulation, and a relentless gaslighting that made me question my own reality. From a young age, it was clear there were two distinct paths laid out for my brother, Mark, and me. Mark, the golden boy, was destined for greatness. Even if that greatness was vaguely defined and constantly funded by our parents, I, on the other hand, was expected to be the sensible, responsible one. The quiet achiever who somehow, despite her own accomplishments, remained perpetually in his shadow. I remember distinctly. When I was about 10, I won a statewide essay contest. It was a huge deal for me, my first real independent achievement. I burst through the door, clutching the certificate, practically vibrating with excitement. My mom glanced at it, offered a perfunctory, "That's nice, dear," and then immediately turned her attention back to Mark, who was attempting, and failing, to build a ridiculously complicated Lego castle. "Look, Sarah, Mark needs your help. Can't you see he's struggling with the instructions?" My excitement deflated like a punctured balloon. It was always about Mark, always about what he needed, what he was doing. My achievements were simply inconvenient distractions from his spotlight. This pattern continued throughout our lives when I chose to pursue finance, diligently working through college with scholarships and part-time jobs, while Mark coasted on his gap years, funded by mom and dad. They barely acknowledged my efforts. "Oh, Sarah's just so sensible," my mom would tell her friends, as if my ambition and hard work were a personality flaw rather than a strength. Meanwhile, Mark's every fleeting interest, from a disastrous attempt at a band to a failed online gaming venture, was met with enthusiastic financial backing and endless praise. "He's just so creative," they'd gush, turning his lack of discipline into a virtue. It wasn't just the unequal financial treatment, it was the emotional disparity. Mark could throw tantrums, break things, act out in any way he pleased, and it would be brushed off as "boys will be boys" or "he's just so passionate." But if I expressed any frustration, any anger, any dissent, I was difficult, negative, or ungrateful. My emotions were a burden. His were simply part of his charming eccentricity. This taught me, very quickly, to bottle everything up, to present a calm, composed front, even when I was raging inside. It was a survival mechanism that, ironically, made me seem even less emotional to them, further justifying their neglect. The family vacation fund was a prime example of their insidious control. It started about 5 years ago, right when my financial consulting business really took off. Suddenly, I had disposable income, and they saw it as an untapped resource. The idea was floated, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a shared fund for a truly spectacular Christmas vacation every year, a way for us to all make memories together? On the surface, it sounded lovely, but the reality was that they dictated the destination, the dates, the activities, and the budget, always extravagant, always requiring a significant contribution from us, the children, even though they were far wealthier than either Mark or I. Or so I thought then. My initial contributions were small, hesitant, but then the subtle pressure tactics began. "Oh, darling, we're planning this amazing trip to the Dolomites, but we're just a little short. It would be so wonderful if you could just chip in a bit more. For family." Or, "Mark's contribution this year is a bit less. He's just starting out. You understand, you're doing so well. Sarah, could you perhaps cover a bit more for him?" And so, out of a misguided sense of obligation and a desperate hope for their approval, I'd always relent. Each year, my contribution grew, becoming a significant drain on my own savings, while I watched them pick out designer ski gear and book Michelin star restaurants for trips I didn't even want to go on. I tried to push back, of course. One year, I suggested a more modest trip, perhaps something focused on charity work or giving back, rather than pure luxury. My idea was met with blank stares, then a dismissive laugh from my mom. "Sarah, dear, we work hard all year. Christmas is about indulgence, not that." I tried to suggest alternative dates that worked better for my business schedule. "Oh, but darling, this is the only time the whole family can make it," my mom would say, subtly reminding me that my schedule was secondary to theirs. The message was always clear: conform or be ostracized. So I conformed, I paid up, I showed up, and I swallowed the bitter pill of resentment. Year after year, convincing myself that this was just how families were, and that I should be grateful for any attention. even if it came with strings attached. That's why the Christmas Eve ultimatum hit so hard. It wasn't just about the money this time. It was about them openly, blatantly, weaponizing my contributions and my presence. They had always done it subtly, with veiled threats and passive-aggressive comments. But to explicitly vote me out, because I refused to fund Mark's latest financial sinkhole, it stripped away any pretense of familial love or respect. It laid bare the transactional nature of our relationship. I was no longer a daughter, I was a reluctant investor, and a failed one at that, in their eyes. The drive home that night was a blur of tears and raw, visceral pain. I pulled into my parking spot, numb, and stumbled into my apartment. The silence was deafening, amplifying the echoes of their cruel words. Voted out, the phrase burrowed into my mind. A toxic little parasite. I collapsed onto my sofa, staring at the dimly lit Christmas tree I had optimistically decorated a week earlier. It looked pathetic now, a symbol of a festive season that felt utterly devoid of joy. My phone buzzed with texts from my mom and Mark. Typical holiday greetings, completely ignoring the preceding argument. They expected me to fall in line, to forget it happened, or perhaps to stew in my wrongdoing, until I saw the error of my ways and came crawling back with my checkbook open. That was their usual playbook. But something had shifted. The pain was still there, a sharp ache in my chest, but it was now laced with a burning indignation. This wasn't just a disagreement, it was a declaration of war. They had drawn a line in the sand, and by doing so, they had forced me to draw my own. I spent the rest of Christmas Eve and Christmas Day in a fog. I declined calls from relatives, mumbled excuses about feeling unwell, and basically went into a self-imposed exile. I scrolled through social media, seeing my friends' joyous family photos, feeling an alienating pang of loneliness. Was my family really this dysfunctional? Was it me? Had I truly been so difficult, so unsupportive? The gaslighting was still strong, even in their absence. Years of being told I was too sensitive, too negative, too stubborn, made me second-guess my own feelings. Maybe I was being unreasonable. Maybe Mark did deserve this investment. Maybe I should just suck it up for the sake of family unity. But then, the memory of their faces, their smug satisfaction as they voted me out, would flash through my mind, igniting the rage all over again. No, this wasn't normal. This wasn't love. This was manipulation. Plain and simple. They had taken my desire for their approval, my yearning for a genuine family connection, and weaponized it against me. And the vacation fund was the perfect symbol of that. It wasn't just my contributions to the fund, it was the principle of it. The subtle blackmail, the coerced participation, the expectation that I would perpetually subsidize their lavish lifestyle and Mark's endless failures. And now, they had literally deemed me unworthy of even participating in the outcome of my own forced contributions. It was the ultimate slap in the face. I lay in bed late that night, unable to sleep, my mind racing. What could I do? What was the logical next step when your family had essentially disowned you for financial reasons? I thought about just cutting them off, disappearing. But that felt like letting them win, letting them control the narrative. They'd just spin it as Sarah being difficult again and carry on as if nothing had happened, enjoying their prepaid luxury vacations while I nursed my wounds in solitude. No, that wasn't going to work. I wasn't just going to disappear. I had to make a statement, a clear, undeniable demonstration that I was no longer their puppet, their ATM, or their emotional punching bag. And it had to be a statement that resonated with their own twisted values: money, appearances, and control. My thoughts kept returning to the vacation fund. All that money, my money, largely. I had always been meticulous with my finances, keeping detailed records. I knew exactly how much I had put into that fund over the past 5 years. It was a substantial sum, enough to make a dent, a very significant dent, in their grand plans. A mischievous, rebellious thought began to form in the darkest corners of my mind. They had voted me out of their future family Christmas, effectively denying me access to the fund's benefits. Despite my contributions, what if I simply took my contributions back? But just taking it back wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't sting. It wouldn't send the message. It needed to be something more, something public, something that would make them feel the humiliation they had so casually inflicted upon me. A flicker of a memory surfaced, something from years ago, about a clause in the original family fund agreement they had drawn up. My dad, ever the stickler for paperwork, had insisted on a formal document, outlining contribution amounts, disbursement rules, etc. I remembered skimming it, signing it, eager to get it over with, but now a tiny detail was nagging at me, a clause about unforeseen circumstances, or perhaps alternative uses of funds if a member withdrew. I couldn't recall the exact wording, but the idea sparked a tiny ember of hope in the icy grip of my despair. What if I could not only reclaim my contribution, but use it in a way that directly undermined their carefully constructed image? What if I could turn their act of petty exclusion into a powerful act of altruism, benefiting someone else entirely, and doing so in a way that highlighted their selfishness? The thought was exhilarating. It was vengeful, yes, but it was also profoundly empowering. It was a way to convert my pain into purpose, my humiliation into a force for good. And the best part, it would be entirely legal. Entirely within the rules they themselves had established. At least in my nascent interpretation. I sat up, the exhaustion replaced by a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't about getting even. It was about getting free. Free from their emotional shackles. Free from their financial expectations. Free from the constant need for their validation. This was about reclaiming my own narrative, my own power, and finally, unequivocally, standing up for myself. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold. A new day, a new beginning. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt a faint flicker of hope. The weight of their expectations, the buried resentments, they were still there, but now a plan was forming. A path forward that promised not just escape, but genuine liberation. I knew this wouldn't be easy. The confrontation would be brutal, but for the first time, I felt ready. The morning after the Christmas Eve debacle, I woke up feeling emotionally battered but surprisingly clear-headed. The raw hurt was still there, a tender bruise on my soul, but beneath it, a tiny ember of defiance had ignited. I knew I couldn't just stew in my anger. I needed to process, to strategize, and most importantly, to find a way to channel this overwhelming negative energy into something constructive. Something that would not only empower me but also send an undeniable message. My first instinct, as it always had been in times of crisis, was to call Emily. Emily wasn't just my best friend. She was my chosen family, the sister I wished I had. We'd met in college, two ambitious young women navigating the labyrinthine world of finance, and she had always been the one who saw through my family's carefully constructed facade. She knew the history, the subtle digs, the financial manipulations. She knew the real me, not the version my parents tried to mold. You won't believe what happened, I blurted out. Even before she could fully say hello, my voice was shaky, still laced with the shock of it all. Let me guess, she said, her voice immediately softening with concern. Another Christmas miracle where your family managed to top their last performance of Who Can Make Sarah Feel Most Insignificant and they weren't poured. I gave a weak, mirthless laugh. Worse, much, much worse. They literally voted me out of the family Christmas next year because I wouldn't bankroll Mark's latest crypto scam. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Then, a sharp intake of breath. They what? Emily's voice was suddenly razor-sharp, tinged with disbelief and fury. Sarah, are you serious? They held a vote like you're a contestant on a reality show. They can just evict. Exactly like that, I said, a fresh wave of humiliation washing over me. Mom, Dad, and Mark, 3-1, unanimous. And they explicitly mentioned the family vacation fund, saying I wouldn't be part of any future trips funded by it. That is, Sarah. That is beyond sick, Emily said, her voice filled with a genuine empathy that immediately made me feel less alone. I knew they were bad, but this is a whole new level of toxic. It's not about the money, is it? It's about control. It's about punishing you for daring to have boundaries. It is, I confirmed. a knot forming in my throat. It's always been about control. And the vacation fund. It's just another tether they use. And now they've cut it. But they've cut it to punish me, not to set me free. But they have, Sarah, Emily said, her voice firm, cutting through my self-pity. They have set you free. Think about it. This is the clearest, most undeniable sign you've ever gotten that their love is conditional on your compliance and your financial contributions. This isn't a family you want to be a part of. Not like this. Her words were a much-needed splash of cold water. She was right. The pain was real, but the clarity was even more so. This blatant act of exclusion, this public shaming, stripped away any lingering illusions I had about their motives. This wasn't about family unity or supporting Mark. It was about power, and they had just shown me how willing they were to wield it. So what do you do now? Emily asked gently. Do you just accept it? Go no contact? I don't know, I admitted, rubbing my temples. Part of me wants to just disappear, but another part, a really angry part, wants to do something that will make them regret this, but not just out of spite, something meaningful. Good, Emily stated. Spite is fleeting, purpose is powerful, and honestly, Sarah, you deserve to channel this into something that benefits you, not something that keeps you tethered to their dysfunction. They want to vote you out, fine. Vote yourself into a life that truly serves you. We talked for hours that day, dissecting the long history of their manipulative patterns, my own complicity in allowing it, and the deep-seated yearning for their approval that had kept me trapped. Emily, with her sharp mind and unwavering support, helped me see that my worth wasn't tied to their validation, my independence, my financial success, my ability to stand on my own 2 feet. These were my strengths, not weaknesses to be hidden or apologized for. She reminded me of all the times I'd built something out of nothing, all the challenges I'd overcome without their help, often despite their subtle sabotage. You've always been the one to pick yourself up, Sarah, she said. They might have tried to knock you down, but they can't keep you there. And this family fund they're so proud of, it's just another symbol of their control. What if you could flip that on its head? Her words sparked a faint memory. The family vacation fund. I had completely forgotten about the formal agreement my dad had drafted years ago. He was meticulous about paperwork, often to a fault. He had insisted on a written agreement, detailing contributions, usage, and what would happen if a member chose to withdraw. At the time, I'd barely glanced at it, eager to appease them and just get it over with. But now, a tiny, almost forgotten detail flickered at the edge of my consciousness. A clause, something about alternative uses. I just remembered something, I said, a jolt going through me. The vacation fund. My dad made us sign a formal agreement when we set it up. I barely read it at the time, but I have a vague memory of a clause. Something about if a contributor withdraws, or if the funds aren't used for the agreed purpose. There was some provision for alternative use, or charitable donation, perhaps. My voice trailed off as the idea, half-formed and audacious, began to solidify. Emily was silent for a moment. Sarah, if there's anything even remotely like that in there, you need to find that document, like, right now. That was the push I needed. I hung up with Emily, my mind buzzing with newfound purpose. I had kept all my important documents in a fireproof safe in my apartment, a habit instilled by years of managing my own finances. It took me a while, digging through old tax returns, investment statements, and property deeds, but finally, tucked away in a folder labeled Family Agreements, I found it, the Family Vacation Trust Deed. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the crisp, legal-sized paper. It was written in my dad's overly formal, slightly convoluted style, full of legalese. I skimmed through the predictable clauses about annual contributions, voting rights on destinations, which, in practice, meant my parents' votes always outweighed ours, and disbursement procedures. My eyes scanned for anything related to withdrawal or alternative use. And then I saw it, tucked away in Article 6, Section 3 titled, Contingency and Dissolution of Individual Contributions. It read, in the event that a contributing family member is no longer able or willing to participate in the designated family vacation, for a period exceeding 2 consecutive years, or if such member formally expresses a desire to withdraw their cumulative contributions, the remaining funds attributed to said member shall, by mutual family consent or in the absence thereof, by the sole discretion of the trustee, the father, Dad's full name, be redirected. Said redirection shall prioritize a reallocation to other family members' contributions to reduce future burdens, or be a charitable donation made in the name of the withdrawing member, provided a legitimate, registered charitable organization is identified and approved by the trustee. My breath hitched. A charitable donation made in the name of the withdrawing member. It was right there, in black and white, and the key phrases, by mutual family consent or in the absence thereof, by the sole discretion of the trustee. My dad was the trustee, and they had just, by their own mutual consent, voted me out of the Christmas vacation, effectively declaring me unwilling to participate. The wording was perfect. It wasn't about my unwillingness to go. It was their decision that I wouldn't be participating. It was an indirect, but legally sound, way for me to reclaim my funds, not for personal use, but for a purpose that would reflect my values, not theirs. The anger that had been simmering began to transform into a cold, calculated resolve. This wasn't just about getting my money back. This was about turning their weapon against them. Using their own rules to make a statement, they wanted to punish me. Fine, I would punish them back, not by attacking them directly, but by exposing their true colors, by turning their act of exclusion into an act of self-empowerment that would humiliate them publicly. Now, the second part of that clause, provided a legitimate, registered charitable organization is identified and approved by the trustee. This was the tricky bit. My dad, the trustee, would never approve of me making a charitable donation with their fund, especially if it was done to spite them. But what if the approval was tacit? What if the reason for the donation was their own vote? They had forced my hand. They had made me unwilling to participate. My mind raced. I needed a charity. Not just any charity, but one that resonated deeply with me. Something that would feel like a full circle moment. Something that connected to a part of myself they had always dismissed. And then, it hit me. A memory from my childhood, long buried under layers of family drama and financial anxiety. When I was little, maybe 7 or 8, my elementary school had a fundraising drive for a local children's hospital. I remember being so moved by the stories of the kids who were sick, who couldn't play or go to school. I poured all my allowance into it, even made handmade cards for the children. It was one of the few times I felt truly passionate about something outside of myself, something genuinely altruistic. My parents, of course, had barely noticed. They were more concerned with Mark's latest soccer trophy. But that feeling of wanting to help, of making a tangible difference, had stuck with me. I pulled out my laptop and started searching. Children's hospital, local charities, pediatric care. After a few minutes, I found it the Hope and Healing Foundation, a charity dedicated to providing support for families of critically ill children and funding innovative pediatric research at the very hospital I remembered from my childhood. Their mission statement was powerful, focusing on dignity, hope, and support for families facing unimaginable challenges. It was perfect. Donating to this charity wouldn't just be a symbolic act of defiance. It would be a genuinely good thing. It would take the money they had hoarded for their lavish self-indulgence and redirect it to truly help vulnerable children and their families. It would be a stark contrast to their superficial values. And it would be done in the name of the withdrawing member, my name. A wave of calm settled over me. This was it. This was my path forward. It was audacious, yes, but it was also strategically brilliant. It wasn't about petty revenge. It was about reclaiming my agency, my values, and turning a toxic situation into a profound act of self-empowerment and benevolence. The next step was crucial: how to execute this legally and irrevocably. I needed expert advice. My work as a financial consultant meant I had a network of legal professionals, many of whom were friends or trusted colleagues. I thought of David Chen, a brilliant corporate lawyer who specialized in trust and estate law. He had a reputation for being meticulous and understanding the nuances of family dynamics, often dealing with similar conflicts. I sent David a cautious email, outlining a hypothetical situation involving a family trust, a withdrawal clause, and a proposed charitable donation. I didn't mention my family by name, but I laid out the core facts. He responded almost immediately. Intrigued, we set up a call for the following week. During the call, I explained everything, leaving out no detail of the Christmas Eve incident. David listened patiently, occasionally interjecting with questions about the exact wording of the trust deed, the history of contributions, and the family's general dynamic. When I finished, he was silent for a moment. Sarah, he finally said, his voice thoughtful. This is something else, but based on the language you've quoted from Article 6, Section 3, you actually have a surprisingly strong case. My heart leaped. Really? Yes, they voted you out of the vacation. Correct, that explicitly makes you unwilling to participate as a result of their actions. It wasn't your choice to withdraw. It was their collective decision to exclude you. And the clause specifically says, in the absence thereof, meaning, in the absence of mutual family consent to reallocate. Your father, as trustee, has sole discretion. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you present him with a legitimate, registered charity, and clearly state your intention to have your cumulative contributions donated under that clause, his refusal to approve would be a breach of his fiduciary duty as a trustee, especially since the family himself excluded you. So, he has to approve it, I asked, a thrill running through me. Not has to, but if he doesn't, you'd have grounds to challenge it legally, which he would almost certainly want to avoid. David clarified, no one wants their family's dirty laundry aired in court, especially not your parents. By the sound of it, their image is paramount, right? Absolutely paramount, I confirmed, a wry smile touching my lips. That was their biggest weakness, their Achilles heel. So, here's the strategy. David continued, outlining a meticulous plan. First, gather all your contribution records, solid proof of what you've put in. Second, formalize your request to your father, citing the specific clause in the deed, stating your intention to have your cumulative contributions donated to the Hope and Healing Foundation in your name. Make it clear that this decision stems directly from their vote to exclude you from future family vacations. Third, offer him the opportunity to approve it, if he doesn't. That's when we hint at legal recourse, but I suspect he won't let it get that far. He'll want to avoid any scandal. And if he tries to reallocate it to Marker himself, that would also be a breach of his duty, given your explicit request for a charitable donation under that clause, especially after their exclusion of you. The reallocation to other family members clause is meant for a willing withdrawal, not a forced exclusion. It's a fine line, but one we can argue effectively. The conversation with David was the final piece of the puzzle, the glimmer of clarity Emily had provided, the rediscovered trust deed, and now David's legal validation. It all coalesced into a solid, actionable plan. The path was clear, albeit daunting. I would be confronting my family directly, using their own rules and their own carefully crafted legal documents against them. It was a high-stakes gamble. But the payoff wasn't just financial. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my autonomy, and my peace of mind. The emotional weight of the past few days began to lift, replaced by a surge of nervous excitement. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. It was about standing up for myself, not just for this one incident, but for all the years of subtle abuse and disrespect. I would take their petty act of exclusion, their attempt to diminish me, and transform it into a powerful act of defiance and generosity. And it would all be done in my name, a permanent marker of my resilience and their ultimate miscalculation. With David Chen's words echoing in my mind, a sense of quiet determination settled over me. The initial shock and pain had solidified into a cold resolve, fueled by the legal validation that my plan wasn't just a fantasy born of anger, but a legitimate, strategic move. This wasn't about lashing out. It was about reclaiming what was mine, not for selfish gain, but to turn a deeply negative experience into something profoundly positive. The strategic unraveling had begun. My first step was to meticulously gather every single piece of financial documentation related to the family vacation trust deed. As a financial consultant, I prided myself on my organizational skills. But even I was surprised by the sheer volume of paperwork. I had kept every bank statement, every transfer confirmation, every email acknowledging my contributions over the past 5 years, line item by line item. I painstakingly tallied up my total contributions. The number was significant, easily enough to fund a truly impactful charitable donation. Far more than just a token gesture. It also highlighted just how much I had been coerced into contributing. Often subsidizing marks lower, often late payments. The anger flared anew as I saw the figures in black and white, a tangible representation of their exploitation. While I was doing this, I also spent hours researching the Hope and Healing Foundation. I delved into their annual reports, their financial transparency, their impact stories. I wanted to be absolutely certain that every dollar I redirected would go directly to where it was needed most, to help those vulnerable children and their families. Their mission statement truly resonated with me, providing comfort, care, and a sense of normalcy to kids battling serious illnesses. It was a stark contrast to the superficial luxury that my family prioritized. The more I read, the more convinced I became that this was the right recipient, a beacon of true purpose in the midst of my family's self-serving world. Next, I drafted the formal letter to my father. The trustee, this was crucial. David had advised me to keep it strictly professional, devoid of emotion, and purely factual, citing the exact clause from the trust deed. It had to be unassailable. Dear Father, this letter serves as a formal notification regarding my cumulative contributions to the Family Vacation Trust, established on date of original trust deed. As you are aware, during our discussion on Christmas Eve, it was communicated to me, through a collective decision, that I would be excluded from participating in future family Christmas vacations, including the one planned for next year's Christmas. This decision, made by mutual family consent, Mother, yourself, and Mark, effectively renders me unwilling to participate in the designated family vacation for a period exceeding 2 consecutive years, as per the terms outlined in Article 6, Section 3 of the aforementioned trust deed. In light of this explicit exclusion, and in accordance with Article 6, Section 3, subsection B, I hereby formally express my desire to redirect my cumulative contributions to a legitimate, registered charitable organization. I propose that my total contributions, amounting to exact calculated amount USD, be donated directly to the Hope and Healing Foundation EIN, charity's EIN number in my name. The Hope and Healing Foundation is a recognized 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to brief mission statement of charity, e.g., supporting critically ill children and their families. I understand that as trustee, you have the discretion to approve this redirection, given the circumstances of my exclusion from the designated family vacation by collective decision. I trust that you will facilitate this transfer in a timely manner, consistent with your fiduciary duties as trustee and the express terms of the trust deed. Please find attached copies of all relevant contribution records for your review. I await your prompt confirmation and the necessary steps for the fund transfer. Sincerely, Sarah, my last name. Reading it over, I felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. It was polite, firm, and left no room for ambiguity. It used their own legal framework against them, trapping them in a corner. The ball was now in their court. And the inclusion of the exact amount of my contributions was a subtle, yet powerful, reminder of just how much I had put in, and how much they stood to lose. I knew this letter wouldn't be received well. My parents hated being challenged, especially when it involved money or public image. This letter, by its very existence, implied wrongdoing on their part, a breach of familial trust, and a potential public scandal if it ever got out. That was their biggest fear. They loved to project an image of perfect generosity and familial harmony. This act, coming from within, would shatter that illusion. I also reached out to Emily, keeping her updated on my progress. She was my rock, cheering me on and reminding me to brace for impact. They're going to try everything, Sarah, she warned. Guilt trips, anger, maybe even threats. But you hold your ground. You have the moral high ground. And now, you have the legal one too. A few days later, I sent the letter via certified mail, requiring a signature confirmation. I wanted undeniable proof that they had received it. The wait was excruciating. Every time my phone rang, my heart jumped. I imagined my mother's furious face as she read it. My father's bewildered attempts to understand the legal implications. Mark's inevitable outrage, once he realized his potential vacation fund was shrinking. Then, the storm broke. It started with a series of frantic phone calls from my mother. I let them go to voicemail. Her messages were a masterclass in passive-aggressive manipulation. "Sarah, darling, why are you doing this? We're a family. This is so hurtful. Are you trying to ruin Christmas for everyone? Your father is so disappointed." Not a single mention of the vote. Of course, always framing me as the aggressor, the unreasonable one. Finally, she sent a text. "Call me now. Your father needs to talk to you about this ridiculous letter." I took a deep breath and called back. My father answered. His voice strained and formal, a tone he usually reserved for difficult business calls. "Sarah," he began, "what is the meaning of this letter? You can't just take the money from the family fund. It's for family vacations. We all contribute." "Father," I replied calmly, using the same formal tone. I believe the letter was quite clear. As per Article 6, Section 3 of the Family Vacation Trust Deed, if a contributing member is unable or unwilling to participate in the designated family vacation, their contributions can be redirected. You, Mother, and Mark collectively voted to exclude me from the upcoming Christmas vacation, thereby rendering me unwilling to participate as per your decision. I am simply exercising the option laid out in the deed, to donate my accumulated contributions to the Hope and Healing Foundation. There was a stunned silence on his end. He clearly hadn't anticipated me using their own meticulously drafted document against them. But that clause is for extreme circumstances, for someone who chooses not to go. Not someone we had a discussion with, he stammered, trying to backtrack. "The deed states unable or unwilling to participate," I countered, my voice steady. "Your collective decision made me unwilling to participate in a family dynamic where my presence is conditional on financial compliance. The language is unambiguous. This is blackmail." "Sarah," he exploded, his composure finally cracking. "You're trying to punish us. This is not how family behaves. Is it how family behaves to vote out a member on Christmas Eve because she refuses to fund her brother's dubious business ventures?" I retorted, a flash of my own anger finally breaking through. "Is that how family behaves, Father, or is it how a family treats an ATM when it runs out of cash?" The line went silent again. I could almost hear his mind scrambling, trying to find a loophole, a counter-argument. "The Hope and Healing Foundation is a legitimate, registered charity," I continued, pressing my advantage. "I've included their EIN and all necessary documentation. As trustee, you have a fiduciary duty to act in accordance with the trust deed. A refusal to facilitate this transfer would constitute a breach of that duty. And I'm sure you wouldn't want to involve legal professionals in this. Would you? It would certainly be untidy." The veiled threat of legal action, coupled with the implication of public exposure, their untidy family affairs becoming public, hit home. Their image was everything. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, his voice defeated. "You're being vindictive." "I am being assertive. Father, I am ensuring that my contributions are used in a way that aligns with my values. Now that I have been explicitly excluded from the purpose you designated them for, it's simply following the terms of your own agreement." He grumbled for a few more minutes, threatening to disown me, a threat I now knew was empty, accusing me of being cold and unfeeling. But I held my ground, calmly reiterating my position, citing the deed, and emphasizing the legality and inevitability of my request. I didn't engage with his emotional manipulation. I stayed focused on the facts, the legal terms, and the immediate action required. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he sighed, a deep, resigned sigh. "Fine," he bit out. "I'll look into it, but don't think this changes anything between us. Sarah, you've made your choice." "Indeed, I have," I replied, feeling a quiet triumph bloom in my chest. "And you made yours on Christmas Eve. I hung up, my hand shaking slightly, but my spirit soaring. I had done it. I had stood my ground. I had used their own weapon against them. The strategic unraveling was proceeding exactly as planned. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the shift in power, the breaking of old patterns. I had taken control of my narrative, and in doing so, had taken a monumental step towards true freedom. This was just the beginning. The next Christmas, for them, would be very different, and for me, it would be the most liberating one yet. The days that followed were a tense silence. My calls and texts from my mother diminished, replaced by a sullen quiet. Mark, surprisingly, didn't contact me directly, likely still in shock or too busy trying to get his crypto venture off the ground. I assumed my father was going through the motions, begrudgingly facilitating the transfer as he had promised. I felt a sense of calm, an almost zen-like peace, knowing that the wheels were in motion. The battle wasn't won yet, but the tide had undeniably turned. I also kept in close contact with David, providing him updates and ensuring I had all my ducks in a row in case my father tried any last-minute maneuvers. David confirmed that all indications pointed to the transfer proceeding. The fear of legal entanglements and public image damage was a far greater deterrent for my parents than any sentimental attachment to the money itself. This period of waiting was critical for my own emotional processing. I had years of resentment to unpack, years of trying to be the good daughter despite the constant invalidation. I started journaling, writing down every memory of their unfairness, every instance of Mark being favored. It was cathartic, a way to acknowledge my pain and anger, and then, slowly, to let it go. This wasn't about bitterness, it was about clarity, and the clearer I became about their dysfunctional patterns, the less power they held over me. The thought of that Christmas money, usually a source of dread and resentment, now filled me with a different kind of anticipation. It wouldn't buy me another forced luxury trip. It wouldn't subsidize Mark's irresponsibility. It would bring comfort to sick children, fund vital research, and genuinely make a difference. And it would bear my name, a quiet testament to my values, in direct opposition to theirs. This act of vengeance was, in fact, an act of profound self-love and altruism, and I knew, deep down, that was the most powerful message of all. The weeks leading up to the next Christmas were eerily quiet on the family front. My parents, true to form, avoided direct confrontation after my father's defeated call. It was the calm before the storm. I knew. They were likely seething, concocting their next move, or perhaps just too mortified to acknowledge what was happening. Mark, as usual, remained blissfully ignorant or simply too self-absorbed to notice the tectonic shifts occurring beneath his feet. I, on the other hand, was preparing, not just mentally, but practically. I had copies of every document, every email, every receipt. I was ready for whatever they threw at me. Then, about 3 weeks before Christmas, the first of the annual family Christmas cards arrived. Not just any card, mind you, but one of those glossy, embossed affairs, featuring my parents and Mark, all beaming, against a backdrop of what looked suspiciously like a luxurious ski resort. The accompanying message, written in my mother's elegant, looping script, was dripping with saccharine sweetness, wishing you a joyous holiday season from the Our Last Name family. We're so excited for our amazing Christmas ski vacation this year, making memories that will last a lifetime. There was a subtle, almost imperceptible jab. No mention of me, of course, just a blanket. The Our Last Name family, pointedly leaving out the one member who had been voted out. It was their typical passive-aggressive move, a public display of their supposed perfect family life, completely ignoring the elephant in the room. More cards followed, from aunts, uncles, and cousins, all mentioning the exciting family ski trip. My parents had clearly been broadcasting their plans, probably highlighting how sad it was that I wouldn't be joining them. They were setting the stage for my absence, subtly blaming me for it without explicitly saying so. This was their public relations campaign, designed to control the narrative before anyone could question why I wasn't there. But I had my own PR campaign brewing, one that would turn their carefully constructed image on its head. The opportunity presented itself a few days later. My mother, perhaps feeling some lingering guilt, or more likely, trying to re-establish control. Sent a group text message to the entire extended family chat. It was a picture of a ski chalet, undoubtedly the one they'd booked, with a caption, "So thrilled for our upcoming Christmas getaway. The chalet is absolutely divine. Can't wait for all the family fun." The message was clearly designed to elicit oohs and ahs from the relatives. Another chance to show off their lavish lifestyle and tightly knit family unit. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was it, the perfect moment. I took a deep breath, composed myself, and typed. I addressed the entire group, maintaining a polite, somewhat formal tone, almost as if I were delivering a business announcement. "That looks absolutely lovely. Mother, I'm so glad to see the families enjoying the benefits of our collective contributions." I paused, letting that sink in. Speaking of contributions, I wanted to share some exciting news on my end. As you all know, I was unfortunately voted out of the family's upcoming Christmas vacation this year, a decision made by Mother, Father, and Mark on Christmas Eve last year. I could almost hear the collective gasp across the family chat. The polite, veneer-thin pleasantries were about to shatter. However, I continued, in light of that decision, and in accordance with the terms of the Family Vacation Trust Deed, specifically Article 6, Section 3, I have chosen to redirect my cumulative contributions from the fund to a cause very close to my heart. I'm incredibly proud to announce that my entire accumulated share, amounting to exact calculated amount USD, has been officially donated to the Hope and Healing Foundation, a wonderful charity dedicated to supporting critically ill children and their families. The donation has been made in my name, Sarah, my last name, and the foundation has already sent the official tax receipt for the donation directly to Father. As trustee of the fund, I attached a screenshot of the official donation confirmation from the Hope and Healing Foundation, clearly showing the amount and my name as the donor. I also subtly included a cropped image of the relevant clause from the trust deed, just to drive the point home that I was acting entirely within the established rules. I believe this is a truly meaningful way to utilize those funds, I concluded, and I'm grateful that the trust deed allowed for such a positive outcome, even under these unique circumstances. Wishing everyone a genuinely happy and purposeful holiday season, I hit send and then I braced myself. The silence that followed in the group chat was deafening. It lasted for what felt like an eternity, probably only a minute or two. Then, the messages started pouring in, not from my immediate family, but from aunts, uncles, and cousins. Aunt Carol, Sarah, is this real? Uncle David voted out. What happened? Cousin Jessica. Wow, Sarah, that's incredible. What a thoughtful thing to do. And then, the inevitable, my mother's furious, red-faced reply, likely typed with trembling hands. "Sarah, what is the meaning of this? This is a private family matter. You're embarrassing us." Mark, predictably, chimed in, equally enraged. "Are you serious? You gave away our vacation money. What the hell?" Sarah, my father, as trustee, finally weighed in, his message stiff and formal, clearly trying to save face. "Sarah, while your decision is certainly unconventional, the funds have indeed been redirected as per the specified clause in the trust deed. We are naturally disappointed by this development, but the family vacation will proceed as planned." His message, intended to project an air of calm control, actually confirmed everything I had said. It validated my action, making it clear that I hadn't acted rogue, but within their own rules, and the word disappointed instead of angry or furious was a transparent attempt to maintain their public facade. I ignored my mother and Mark's furious texts and calls that immediately started flooding my phone. Instead, I focused on the support messages. Cousin Jessica, who I knew had always felt slighted by my parents' favoritism, messaged me privately, "Sarah, that was epic. Seriously, good for you. They had it coming." My Aunt Carol, usually timid, called me directly, her voice hushed. "Darling, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, but what you did, it was truly generous." The satisfaction I felt was immense. It wasn't just about the money or the public announcement. It was about taking back my narrative. For years, they had controlled the story, Sarah. The difficult one, Sarah. The ungrateful one, Sarah. the one who never quite fit in. Now, I was Sarah, the one who stood up for herself, the one who prioritized compassion over luxury, the one who turned a cruel exclusion into a meaningful act of charity. The family chat continued to explode, a mix of shock, outrage, and genuine admiration for my move. My parents tried to shut it down, but the cat was out of the bag. The carefully cultivated image of the perfect, harmonious, our last name family was crumbling, exposed by their own actions and my strategic response. That evening, my phone rang again. It was my mother, but this time. Her voice wasn't sugary or subtly manipulative. It was raw, filled with a venomous fury I had rarely heard directed at me so openly. "You absolute monster," she shrieked. "How could you do this to us? Do you know what people are saying? Your father is mortified. Mark is beside himself. You've ruined Christmas. You've ruined everything." "I ruined Christmas?" I asked, my voice calm, almost detached. "Mother, you, father, and Mark voted me out of Christmas. You publicly humiliated me. You tried to coerce me into funding a reckless venture. I simply used the means available to me, within the framework you yourselves created, to redirect funds that were meant for me, but which you decided I was no longer worthy of. I didn't ruin Christmas. I simply ensured my contributions served a purpose aligned with my values." "Values," she scoffed, her voice dripping with contempt. "You have no values. Sarah, you're selfish. You're vindictive. This was our money for our family. You betrayed us. It was my money, Mother, that I contributed. And yes, it was for our family. But you decided I was no longer part of that hour. The trust deed provided a contingency for that very scenario. I followed the rules." "Rules. You're twisting the rules. You're a cold, calculating witch. I can't believe you're my daughter." Her words, once so potent, now held little power over me. They were the desperate, flailing accusations of someone whose control was slipping away. "Believe what you wish, Mother," I said, my voice unwavering, "but the funds are now with the Hope and Healing Foundation. The tax receipt is with Father. There's nothing more to discuss. We're going to fight this, Sarah. We're going to get that money back," she threatened. "You're welcome to try," I said, a slight smile playing on my lips. "But I have all the documentation, and David Chen, my lawyer, is fully appraised of the situation, I assure you. It would be far more untidy for you than for me." The mention of David Chen, a respected name in legal circles, seemed to deflate her slightly. She knew I wasn't bluffing. She knew their image was more important than winning a public legal battle that would air all their dirty laundry. "I don't know why I even bothered to call you," she spat, her voice thick with resentment. "You're no daughter of mine." "Perhaps not, Mother," I replied, feeling a strange lightness. "Perhaps I never was, in the way you wanted. But I'm finally being true to myself. Happy holidays." And with that, I hung up. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of emotions. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking. But beneath it all, there was a profound sense of liberation. I had done it. I had faced the dragon, used its own fire against it, and emerged not unscathed, but undeniably victorious. The unveiling, as I thought of it, was complete. I had pulled back the curtain on their meticulously crafted illusion of family harmony and exposed the transactional, conditional nature of their love. And in doing so, I had taken back my power. The Christmas that year would indeed be different. For them. It would be tainted by public humiliation and the knowledge of their significant financial loss. For me, it would be the first truly free Christmas I had ever experienced. A testament to my resilience and my newfound commitment to my own well-being. The holiday season, once a source of dread, was now a symbol of my profound self-empowerment. The immediate aftermath of my group chat announcement was, as expected, pure chaos. My phone became a hot potato, vibrating incessantly with furious calls and texts from my mother and Mark. My mother's messages oscillated between outright rage and pathetic pleas for me to undo what I'd done. As if I could magically recall a wire transfer, Mark's texts were simpler, just a string of expletives and accusations of how I'd ruined everything and stolen his vacation. My father, predictably, stayed silent after his initial public damage control. He was likely strategizing, weighing his options, and silently fuming. I let most of the calls go to voicemail. I didn't need to engage in their emotional warfare. I had made my move, and it was decisive. Engaging now would only give them the opportunity to gaslight me further, to drag me back into their twisted dance of guilt and manipulation. I had finally cut the strings, and I wasn't about to tie them back on. However, the extended family's reaction was far more varied and, in some cases, surprisingly supportive. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, expressing solidarity. Aunt Carol, my mother's own sister, called me again, sounding genuinely distraught. "Sarah, your mother is absolutely livid," she whispered, as if afraid of being overheard. "She's saying you've disgraced the family, but honestly, darling, some of us, we've seen how they treat you, and what you did for those children. That's truly admirable." Her words were a balm to my soul. For so long, I had felt like I was battling them alone, that their version of reality was the only one that mattered. To hear that some family members saw through the facade, even quietly, was incredibly validating. It wasn't about public vindication, but about knowing I wasn't crazy, that my feelings and experiences were real. The most intense confrontation, however, came a few days later, when my parents insisted on a family meeting. My father called, his voice cold and commanding. "Sarah, we need to discuss this face to face. Come to the house tomorrow evening." "Father," I replied, maintaining a calm, professional tone. "I believe everything that needed to be said has been said. My decision is final, and the funds have been transferred. There's nothing to discuss." "There is everything to discuss," he boomed. "Your mother is distraught. Mark is furious. This affects the entire family. And you will show us the respect of appearing to explain yourself. I owe no one an explanation for exercising my rights under a document you yourselves drafted, especially after being explicitly excluded." I stated, "If you wish to discuss anything, it must be with my lawyer, David Chen. I've already provided you with his contact information." The mention of David seemed to momentarily stump him. "Are you threatening us with legal action, Sarah?" he asked, his voice laced with a dangerous edge. "I am simply stating that any further discussion regarding the Family Vacation Trust and its funds will need to go through my legal counsel." I clarified, "I have no desire for further personal confrontation, but I will protect my interests and ensure the proper execution of the trust deed." He hung up in a huff. I knew they would try to corner me, to guilt-trip me into backing down, but I was done. I had spent years walking on eggshells, constantly afraid of their disapproval. No more. The Christmas Eve vote had been the final straw, breaking the camel's back and, ironically, setting me free. Despite my refusal, they didn't give up. The following day, I received an unexpected visit. My mother and Mark, standing on my doorstep, looking grim-faced. My mother was dressed impeccably, as always, but her eyes were red-rimmed, and her mouth was set in a thin, angry line. Mark looked like a petulant child, arms crossed, glaring at me. "Sarah," my mother began, her voice quivering with what she hoped sounded like profound sadness, but which I recognized as barely contained fury. "We just want to talk as a family. I've already stated that any discussions regarding the fund need to go through my lawyer," I said, keeping my tone flat, not inviting them in. I stood in my doorway, creating a clear physical boundary. "This isn't about the fund anymore, Sarah," Mark burst out, stepping forward aggressively. "This is about you stabbing us in the back. You took our vacation." "I took my money, Mark, which I contributed, and which was meant for a family vacation I was explicitly excluded from by your vote," I corrected him, my gaze unwavering, "and I chose to donate it to a very worthy cause, entirely within the legal terms of the trust deed your own father drafted. Don't you dare hide behind legal loopholes." "Sarah," my mother shrieked, her facade of sadness crumbling. "You did this to hurt us, to embarrass us? Do you know how humiliating it is for your father and me to explain why we're going on this trip without you, and why our family fund is suddenly short by thousands of dollars? Your humiliation is a direct consequence of your own actions." "Mother," I stated, my voice calm, contrasting sharply with her rising hysteria. "You chose to vote me out. You chose to make my presence conditional on my financial contributions to Mark's ill-advised ventures. I simply reacted to your decision. If you find the optics unfavorable, Perhaps you should reflect on the choices you made, rather than blaming the person you ostracized. You're heartless, she cried, tears finally welling in her eyes. Tears I knew were more for her ruined image than for any genuine pain. After everything we've done for you, the sacrifices we've made. Sacrifices. I scoffed, a genuine, bitter laugh escaping me. What sacrifices, Mother? You supported Mark's every whim while I worked 3 jobs to pay for college. You constantly belittled my career choices while funding his failures. You manipulated me into contributing to lavish vacations I didn't even want to go on, just to maintain an image. What sacrifices did you make for me? My bluntness stunned them into silence. Mark looked genuinely shocked, probably never having considered my perspective before. My mother's face twisted in disgust. You're a truly ungrateful child, Sarah, she said, her voice dripping with venom. I regret the day you were born. The words hit me, but surprisingly, they didn't break me. They felt like the final severing, the last, desperate attempt to inflict pain, and in that moment, I realized they had nothing left to hold over me. That's your prerogative, Mother, I replied, a calm, almost serene smile on my face. But I don't regret the day I chose to finally stand up for myself. Now, if you'll excuse me. I have plans. I began to close the door slowly. Wait, Mark suddenly interjected, stepping forward. What about the Christmas trip? Seriously, you just left us hanging with less money for the chalet. That's messed up. Sarah. Mark, I said, looking him directly in the eye. The money I contributed was my money, and it was for a family trip I was excluded from. It's now gone to a charity that helps children who truly need it, not to subsidize your lavish ski trip. Perhaps if you focused less on entitlement and more on earning your own way, you wouldn't be in this position. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time, he seemed genuinely speechless, confronted with a reality beyond his pampered existence. Goodbye, I said firmly, and gently closed the door, leaving them standing on my porch. Stunned and defeated, I leaned against the closed door, taking a deep, shuddering breath. My heart was pounding, my hands still trembling. But the feeling that surged through me was not fear, but pure, exhilarating liberation. It was over. The years of emotional blackmail, the subtle manipulations, the constant fight for recognition, it was all gone. I had finally, unequivocally, cut them off. The days that followed were filled with a profound sense of peace. The tension that had resided in my shoulders for decades slowly began to melt away. I didn't hear from my immediate family directly after that. The silence was deafening, but it was a welcome silence. The only communications were indirect. My father reluctantly confirmed via email to David that the transfer to the Hope and Healing Foundation had been completed, and that the tax receipt was in their possession. It was a victory, quiet and understated, but a victory nonetheless. I spent that Christmas not with my biological family, but with Emily and a few close friends. It was a small, intimate gathering, filled with genuine laughter, heartfelt conversations, and no underlying tension. We made our own traditions, exchanged thoughtful gifts, and cooked a simple but delicious meal for the first time. Christmas felt truly joyful, unburdened by expectations or performances. I also received a lovely thank you letter from the Hope and Healing Foundation, acknowledging my generous donation and explaining how the funds would be used to support a new family housing initiative near the hospital and to purchase much-needed medical equipment. Reading it, a warmth spread through me that far surpassed any fleeting pleasure from a luxury vacation. This was real impact, real purpose. The fallout with my family was messy, as I had anticipated. Some relatives, particularly those who had always been closer to my parents, began to distance themselves. I received a few frosty emails or silent unfriendings on social media, but others, like Aunt Carol and Cousin Jessica, became closer. They were the ones who truly saw me, who understood the dynamics I had struggled with for so long. They became my chosen family, the people who celebrated my authenticity, not my compliance. I learned invaluable lessons during this period. The most profound was that true freedom comes from within, from setting boundaries, and from refusing to let others define your worth. My parents had used money as a tool of control, and I had used it as a tool of liberation. Their attempt to vote me out had inadvertently given me the power to truly vote myself into a life of authenticity, self-respect, and genuine purpose. The journey wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when the ingrained desire for parental approval tried to creep back in, but each time I remembered the Christmas Eve ultimatum, their cold, calculating faces, and the raw humiliation I had felt. And then I remembered the Hope and Healing Foundation, the faces of those children, and the profound sense of rightness that came from aligning my actions with my deepest values. That was the fuel that kept me going, the unwavering compass that guided me towards my new dawn. I was finally free. If you've ever had a truly transformative moment, a point of no return where your life irrevocably shifts, you know that the immediate aftermath is rarely a neatly tied bow. It's messy, it's uncomfortable, but it's also incredibly liberating for me. Voting out my family from their own Christmas vacation fund and redirecting it to a children's charity was that moment. It wasn't just an act of defiance, it was an act of profound self-reclamation. And the life that unfolded afterwards was, in many ways, a new dawn. That particular Christmas, the one they tried to exclude me from, turned out to be the most meaningful one I had ever experienced. Instead of the usual performative luxury and underlying tension, I spent the day with Emily and a small group of friends. We had a potluck dinner, played board games, and simply enjoyed each other's genuine company. There were no veiled insults, no financial expectations, no carefully orchestrated appearances. It was pure, unadulterated joy. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly seen and celebrated for who I was, not for what I could provide. The emotional dust didn't settle overnight. Of course, the silence from my immediate family was palpable, a heavy absence that used to gnaw at me. But now, it felt like a peaceful quiet. I knew they were likely still furious, probably spinning tales of my betrayal to anyone who would listen. But their narrative no longer held power over me. Their opinions, once so vital to my self-worth, had been stripped of their authority. My relationship with my parents and Mark became almost non-existent. They never called me again. Not directly anyway, except for the terse email from my father confirming the donation. It was a complete severing of ties, a clean break from decades of a toxic dynamic, and surprisingly, it didn't hurt as much as I once feared it would. The pain was replaced by a sense of calm, a lightness I hadn't realized I was missing until it arrived. It was the peace of knowing I was finally free from the endless cycle of trying to earn their love and approval. But while some doors closed, others opened. My bond with Emily deepened even further. She had witnessed my journey from compliant daughter to empowered woman, and her unwavering support had been a lifeline. She truly became the sister I always longed for, and my connection with certain extended family members, particularly Aunt Carol and Cousin Jessica, strengthened. They secretly admired my courage and saw the truth of my parents' behavior. They offered quiet support, understanding glances at family gatherings I did choose to attend when my parents weren't present, and validation that I wasn't alone in recognizing the dysfunction. They formed a new kind of family network for me, one built on genuine connection and mutual respect, rather than obligation or manipulation. Professionally, the whole experience also pushed me forward. The strategic thinking required to execute my plan, the calm assertiveness I had to employ, and the sheer nerve it took to stand up to my family, all honed my skills as a financial consultant. I found myself more confident in advocating for my clients, more willing to call out unhealthy financial patterns, and more empowered to guide them towards decisions that truly served their best interests, not just the interests of others. My business thrived, ironically. As I leaned more into my authentic self, the Hope and Healing Foundation also became an important part of my life. I didn't just make the one donation, I became a regular, albeit anonymous, supporter, knowing that my vacation fund was contributing to tangible good. Helping real children and families in desperate need was far more fulfilling than any luxury trip could have ever been. It was a constant reminder that even from the most painful experiences, something beautiful and impactful could emerge. It reinforced my belief that true wealth wasn't about accumulation, but about purposeful contribution. Looking back, The biggest lesson I learned was about the true meaning of boundaries. For years, I believed that setting boundaries meant being selfish or unloving. My family certainly tried to convince me of that, but I discovered that boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about protecting your inner peace and defining what you will and won't accept in your life. They are an act of self-love, and they are essential for healthy relationships. Even if those relationships ultimately change or end, I also learned the power of self-definition. For too long, my identity was shaped by my family's expectations, the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who would always bail them out. But when they voted me out, they inadvertently gave me the opportunity to redefine myself on my own terms. I am not just a financial consultant. I am a resilient woman who values integrity, compassion, and fierce independence. I am someone who stands up for herself and for what is right, even when it's uncomfortable. And that's the message I want to share with all of you watching or reading this. If you're stuck in a similar situation, feeling suffocated by family expectations, by conditional love, or by financial manipulation, know this: you are not alone. It's incredibly painful to confront the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. It's terrifying to break free from patterns that have been ingrained since childhood. But your worth is not tied to their approval. Your peace is not negotiable. It takes courage. It takes strength. It might mean losing relationships you once thought were essential. But sometimes, shedding those burdens is the only way to truly fly. And when you finally stand up for yourself, when you reclaim your narrative, the feeling of empowerment is unlike anything else. You might just find that the greatest gift you can give yourself, and perhaps even the world, is your own unwavering truth. So, if you've ever felt like you needed permission to prioritize your own well-being, this is it. Give yourself that permission. Set those boundaries. Reclaim your power. And remember, your story is yours to write. If you connected with any part of my story, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Share this video with anyone you know who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Sometimes just hearing someone else's experience can be the spark they need. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, or if you've had to deal with something similar. Drop your experiences in the comments below. Your journey matters.